listening to the podcast Advertising Playbook, your resource to better understand and execute successful podcast ad campaigns. Hello and welcome to the podcast Advertising Playbook. I'm your host, Heather Osgood, and I am joined today by Greg Glenday. He is the global CBO for Acast. Greg, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
So, Greg, now you have been at Acast for about 9 months, and I'm just curious, what attracted you to the podcast space?
I've had a multimedia career, as we've talked about. I've never really been pigeonholed into one particular medium. I love strategy and advertising and media engagement. So my last company was probably as far as you can get. We were all video, digital out-of-home video, where I was the CEO. And we sold that company and I took a little time off and I really wanted to be methodical about what's next. And I put a little presentation together around what's important to me, my values, what I enjoy, what I'm good at. And I tried to find some stuff that, that kind of fit in the Venn diagram. And when you start doing that, things get really clear. And nobody believes me when I tell them this, but the day I completed that document, I had gotten an email that I'd love to meet with the CEO of this podcasting company. And I'd vaguely been aware of Acast. Podcasting is one of my passions. Like I know you go way back, so I feel funny saying that you've been thinking about this for a long time and have some deep thinking on it. I've always been a fan. Podcasting's changed my life as a consumer. I don't walk the dogs without a podcast. I don't go in the woods. I don't work out without a podcast. My music consumption has come way down, but I have new hobbies. I have these little communities that I'm part of and these interesting asymmetric relationships with the host where I know a lot about a lot of people. So I was always excited about it. And I always thought that podcasting was a really special place for brands. And I can tell you my favorite podcast, I can tell you all of their sponsors off the back of my hand. And I don't think people can do that with their favorite radio station. It's a transactional relationship. Right. Where in podcasting, it's so much more intimate. And so I've always felt like this is the holy grail is word of mouth at scale. And I always thought that's what podcasting was. And I always wondered why there's some great advertisers, but especially in the US, a lot of the blue chips, the Ad Age 100, I'd never hear them. And so when I met Ross, who I think you know Ross, and we hit it off right away, and what he was looking for from a partner in crime on the strategy side and thinking about the creators and the audience and sales strategy and all things that I really enjoyed in my career. Our first meeting, we started whiteboarding and it was kind of like, what could we do together? So I came home and I said to my wife, I know I'm not looking for a job yet. I met this guy and she was like, great, get out of the house, go take. But I said, I met this guy. The company's what I'm looking for. It's the right size. It's the right culture. I think I could partner. People and culture are really important to me. It checks all the boxes. So it's kind of like, I don't have to do a job search. Like I found this and let's get started. So I started last August and I haven't looked back. So long answer to a short question.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think that those conversations, when you start talking with someone and all of a sudden you are whiteboarding and you're like, oh, this is good. We could go deep here. Like that means a lot. So that's very cool to hear. I also love that you mentioned word of mouth advertising. I feel like I haven't heard someone say that in a while. And I know that for myself, just coming from an ad sales background, that was always so difficult with traditional mediums when I would walk into a business and they would say, well, word of mouth just works best. And you're like, oh, how do we do that? And really, podcasts are like amplified word of mouth, which I think is why the advertising is so powerful. So it's great to hear that you saw that like right off the bat.
Yeah, I've only worked for 5 companies in 30 years or whatever it was. So I'm not somebody that, but I know when I was at an ad network that was really, truly an ad network, just digital, transactional, it was high performance stuff, but it was trading impressions for dollars. And it just felt soulless to me. It felt like it was so disconnected from the creativity. And it was more about, and I think ad tech did this to a lot of advertising. And this is what I want to talk about with the IAB is, let's not let this happen to podcasting, right? Like ad tech came in and really, I think a lot of publishers would do things differently if they knew what was going to happen when digital and ad tech came in and put that layer on top and kind of sopped up a lot of the money and the value from the people that are actually delivering the content. So I feel like podcasting is at this kind of base camp point where we've come so far, but now it's time to professionalize it, especially in the US, get the big brands on board. And we just have to make sure that we're the ones who make don't let this happen to us. We should be almost like a collective representative for all these podcasters. And that's what's so cool about Acast. We have so many shows that like we're not just we're not just representing six big shows we have. It's 100,000 podcasts and we care about all of them. And we think in some cases, the smaller ones, I think, going back to the word of mouth, I think they can be more effective if you do dozens of smaller shows and you speak to that audience in a really intimate way in the earbuds. It is water cooler, it is word of mouth, and you can do it at scale. So I think that's special. We want to hold on to it. And there's some creativity to it that other mediums don't have when you get scale.
No, I totally agree. So one of the things that I love about Acast is I feel like you guys are always launching these new initiatives. So since you've been with Acast, is there something that you have launched that really has just stood out to you as being a kind of a favorite project?
Yeah, yes, it's funny. So I think about, I'm just going to preface this with, I think about two ends of the spectrum for podcast advertising, and I don't think we have to pick one. I think our competitors and some other companies have said, oh, we just want it to be transactional. We want it to be a scale medium, programmatic, take it away. Who cares? And, leave it up to the marketplace. And then there's the cross-platform integrated stuff there where I believe that that's really fun and there's going to be tons of growth there. So I'm excited about the integrated marketing and that part of it, which I hope we talk about. But my answer is on the other end of the spectrum is the growth marketing, the way we've combined our self-serve platform, which was just kind of a whimsical test. It's a real thing now. Like it's a real
Mhm,
business. So
mhm.
we have everything from the high touch creative team, use an agency, what's the big idea, what's the show going to do, all the way to the using our tools like Ad Collab and self-serve to take this creativity and scale it. The fact that we've added staff to it because it's self-serve, but it's gotten enough attention in the marketplace that we're giving it resources. So the idea that we can do both and we can make the transactional, high volume transactional part better for the advertiser and the creator. So I'm most excited about the tools that our product teams are building. I don't think a lot of podcast companies have the engineering firepower we have. So
Mhm.
I get really excited when we take a medium that's not very sophisticated on the technical side and we do something that is you'd expect from a Trade Desk or a Google or somebody like that. So yeah, I would say Ad Collab working with self-serve to make it easier and faster for smaller brands to participate in podcasting.
Yeah,
So
I love that. I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. And I'm sure you have seen this. I think that the one of the biggest missing links in the podcasting industry is still the technology. And that is one of the great things about Advertise Cast is that you guys have all the levers to pull to really make it scale, which is so exciting. So I'm curious when we think about your background in video, YouTube announced late last year that they would be ingesting RSS feeds for the first time. And
yeah.
I'm curious how you feel like that has changed the podcast landscape.
This is a great question. And the cool thing is I have this conversation with a lot of people and it's hard to find two people with the same opinion, which means it's a good problem to be thinking about because depending on who you talk to, the way I look at it, it's interesting. This is just yesterday, Group M reclassified YouTube from digital into CTV. I don't know if you saw
I
that.
saw that. I thought
Yeah.
that was really fascinating. Actually, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my brain around it, to be
I
honest.
know. Well, it's interesting because in my previous role, and again, I had one video role, and the rest has been audio or audio adjacent. But in video, we tried hard because we were video out of home, and we were in the out of home bucket, and we tried really hard to get into the CTV bucket because there's all that money there. What
Mhm.
wound up happening is we created a halfway video out of home became a thing that was yes, it's out of home because it's on screens, but it's sight, sound, and motion. So you need to think about it like video with the creative and everything. So we kind of created a new category. And I'm not sure. I think podcasting is analogous to some of these other things, but it's not the same. And if you think about YouTube, when we talk to them directly, and it's like they've got 2 billion users and they're really into the automated part. Obviously, they churn a lot of revenue without a lot of human touch. So when you talk to them about podcasting, it's hard to imagine they're thinking about how bespoke it has to be and all the things they have to do that doesn't quite fit with the algorithmic push the content to the user. And I go down YouTube rabbit holes all the time. I think it's an amazing, amazing product and it gets my attention. I learn about podcasts there. I don't consume them there. So when we think about advertising, right, we think about our three constituents. It's the creator. And if you have great creators, they attract an audience. That's our second, that monetizable audience that's got high value. they attract advertisers, and then great advertisers attract bigger creators. And we hope we can create this flywheel that helps Acast grow if we support if we think about all three constituents equally. So in this case, we feel like we have the right, if we have a huge show that does promos on TikTok, Instagram, live events, tours, YouTube, if a brand comes to us, especially on that integrated marketing side, and they think about what else can we do to surround this show, we feel like we have the right to open that up and just say, hey, we're not just selling you the RSS impressions, we're selling you access to this audience. We're renting you that relationship and you're participating in word of mouth that has real credibility. We can prove it works. So we think of YouTube as an awesome place for, I don't think it's going to replace a feed where someone like seeks it out, but we think
Mhm.
it's an awesome place to extend reach. We think we tell our creators and the creators that are in our incubator program that that's a great place for you to extend your audience, meet new people, find new listeners. I don't think it's a huge threat to us. I think it's an enhancement. I think it's a
Mhm.
great part. It's just different than the way a lot of people consume it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah. One of the questions that is always so difficult for me to wrap my brain around is that I like audio for audio. Like I enjoy, as you said, walking the dog, listening to a podcast,
yeah,
exercising, listening to a podcast, cleaning the house, listening to a podcast, right? Like it for me, that audio piece is what differentiates it. And I understand obviously billions of viewers on YouTube. I understand 18 to 34 demo much stronger there. 18 to 34 has, well, 18 to 25 hasn't been as strong on podcasting as that 25 to 45. I see all of those components. Where I struggle with it is that video consumption is very different than audio consumption and engagement is very different in podcasting. And so it's for me it's been one of those kind of moments where I'm having to really wrap my brain around exactly what it is that we're selling in some cases
yeah,
because an audio listener is going to be so different than a video listener and is different than a social media consumer, right? Like they're all very different. I do see though where the power comes in, which is where I get most excited. And I think that you guys obviously see this and are excited about it too, is this stepping away from classifying our talent as podcasters and really reclassifying them as content creators. And so
yeah,
that really is the piece I think that is important. If we can jump over and say, hey, we're no longer podcasters, we're content creators, and then look at each of those and say, okay, there is going to be power in the audio, and this is how we execute an audio campaign. There's power in video, and this is how we execute the video campaign. Tell us a little bit about where Acast is at with this, because obviously, I think you guys said you've been doing these multi-integrated campaigns for over 6 years. So it's not necessarily something new to Acast, but tell me a little bit about how you guys have experienced this multi-channel approach.
yeah. That's a great question, and I love the way you're thinking about it. So the way we think about it is, well, I'll come back to that, but let me like just the first part of your question. If I don't write it down, I won't come back to it.
No, no
Um,
worries. I get
yeah,
it.
the first part of your question, how do we think about what is a podcast? Right, I've written about this recently. We talk about it all the time. The existential, what's a podcast? Right, and I use this example all the time. It's like, okay, take a like talk show host. The pandemic comes and they've got their show and they wear their tie and they've got the desk and the couch and it's very produced and there's commercial breaks and it's TV. Then they do the free flowing sweatshirt, pajamas. Maybe the camera's on, maybe it's not. Longer conversations, let your hair down. So we say all the time, we're podcast first, not only. So it's audio first, podcast first, not only. And we believe that some shows lend themselves. I think there are shows if you're referring to charts and if there's things and you need to do a presentation and there's slides and there's those shows like that where they have data and they, debates, all kinds of things like that. Here's an image from I'm listening to this ancient culture podcast and they show these images of archaeological digs and you kind of need to see it. And then there's some that are hybrid where, it's once in a while it's you and I talking, but if you put it on, you're going to get the gist of the show without seeing the video of the two people talking. I think it's evolving. But if you take that late night show, right? And then they get casual and it's a podcast and it's free flowing and there's no set, it could be an hour, it could be two, it could be whatever. It's very loose and conversational. And then they started making those more professional. And then all of a sudden you're almost back to the beginning where they've got a set and they're wearing a tie and they have a guest and it's an hour. So some of these shows just feel like they've taken content from other mediums and just said it's a podcast now because it's on demand. And I think that's very, I think we're going to settle as an industry, and we want to work with people like the IAB on, let's set some industry definitions that help everybody. Is it the on demand part? Like, how do you say it should be more casual? It's hard to say that, but it doesn't have to be audio only. So we think about it, depends on the show. We've got some shows that do not do video because they feel like it changes the conversation.
Mm,
Somebody has to get dressed and they're worried about how they look, and you're aware of your body language. It changes the conversation and it becomes less intimate. We
mhm,
have creators that believe that, but we call them all creators, creator network. It's how we think about it. I don't think we say podcaster much anymore at all on the content side. So
mhm,
I think that's right. Then the way we think about integrated is we've been doing it, but it's usually when an advertiser the last 6 years, maybe there's a great relationship and they're like, what else can we do together?
mm,
Or they seek us out, or maybe we have an entrepreneurial salesperson that's creative. So we've been doing it kind of here and there. We've essentially productized it now where we have an integrated marketing lead where we've hired somebody that doesn't just pitch random ideas off the shelf. It's working on bigger brand briefs, not a performance podcast specific opportunity where they already know what they want to buy and they've got shows they want. We want to get brand briefs from big brands that are curious about podcasting. And then we want to blow them away with our research, our data, our technology, and then our concepts that fit their brand brief with the right shows and the right audience. So we've started really having a pipeline, hiring people that can do that. If you look at the new salespeople, even that we've hired in the US, we've got people from TED, we've got people from Twitter Entertainment when it was Twitter. We've got people from all places where they know how to answer a brand brief in a,
mhm,
solution-based selling. So
mhm.
not a new idea, but newer to podcasting, I think, to make it more formal.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I always go back to my radio days. We used to call it NTR, non-traditional revenue, and it was like this idea that we weren't just selling radio, we were going to sell all these other things with it. And it gets back to that all things old or new again. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's such a powerful position because it works so well for the brand. And when we see that there is such a high crossover, I know that you all had referenced the Signal Hill study that had been done, that 50% of people in that social media following for that content creator are also listening to their podcast. So we know that there is a lot of crossover that is happening. I'm curious, why do you think that you have seen such a huge increase in a request for these types of campaigns? And is it a chicken or egg scenario? Is it that you've hired these really powerful salespeople who have this solution based positioning and they're able to go out and really find those opportunities? Or are the buyers coming to you and saying, hey, we want something more?
A little of both, but it's funny. I hadn't thought about the term NTR in a long time. It was on all the reports, and it's oh my gosh. So that was kind of my favorite thing in my career was doing these NTR campaigns around radio, and a lot of it. Radio's done this forever. Print does a great job of this, right? A lot of print revenue. Where you think about the Maxim Super Bowl party, they made more money on the Super Bowl party, the live event. They were launching rockets in the desert. They were doing all these cool experiential things. And that's what radio was. There's a lot of revenue in Z100 doing a remote at a location. So there's precedent for this is how do you go beyond your core medium? And so I think the reason I think it's exploding now for us, I think we're putting more effort against it. So I'd like to think we're doing that, but it's not
Mhm,
just us. I always say like some of these bigger brands are podcast curious now and they're kicking the tires. They know there's an engaged audience there, like big blue chip brands that are not performance based, but want to build a brand. They know there's an engaged audience. You can do that word of mouth at scale thing. They figure that out. And then they're just like, how do we solve some of these problems that we're worried about? Brand safety. So hold our hands a little bit. And if we have a big idea on a brand safe set of shows and we can show them how we produce it, we
mhm.
activate it for them. We do the recaps. We make them look great. And then I always say, we'll pay for the research. Try something new with us and don't take my word for it. Like you pay for the campaign, I'll pay for the research. And then our only agreement is we both get the results at the same time. And if it worked, you keep going.
Mhm.
So we're having these higher level conversations and trying to sort out how different brand planners think about podcasting, where we are. Don't just buy it programmatically, but reach out to some of the bigger players for I think you'd be really impressed with how creative we can be because it's such a flexible medium.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk to me a little bit about this idea of short form video and audio working well together. And I guess the reason I'm curious about it, I know that at True Native, when we're selling campaigns, we're finding that buyers are more interested in kind of that syndicated experience. Like, as we're doing now, we're recording this in video, we'll be launching it on audio, we'll also be launching it on YouTube. And we're not, it's going to be the exact same thing. You can listen or you can watch and you're going to get the same experience. I do find that a lot of our content creators are saying, yeah, but what about that short form, right? Because obviously TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, and there's just all of this really short content. And I've struggled with how do we wrap our brains around this idea from an advertising perspective. From a content perspective, that's easy. We know we can create shorts. We know that's going to lead into YouTube viewerships. We know that that is has the potential to lead into audio listenership. But how do we take that short form video and integrate it from an advertising perspective? What are your thoughts?
There are tons of ways, and I can't say the campaign right now because we haven't announced we're going
Sure.
to do the press release, but there are a lot of advertisers that have recognized that. So we're trying to build it in so that it takes that journey. So that if we have a campaign, it'll take the journey with you. A good example, like BrewDog in the UK, right? They almost did like a naming rights deal for the studio. So we do end cards on any of the promos when if the show is 2 hours and they're going to put out the funniest 30 seconds or the most awkward, here's the 45-second, and they're going to put that out. We make sure that we help with all the creative. We produce the end card that has BrewDog. You'll see the sign, the tap in the thing. And then they end the promo with brought to you by a little sort of baked in sponsorship that comes with it. So we've included those as part of the as we sell it. This is what the creator agrees to do. This is their beyond RSI. Those get built into the schedule and we plan them and they become kind of one of those paid earned media campaigns that pretty standard. So we've just made that a little bit more formal. Include the advertiser before, not after, and don't just stick it in as an ad. We're not currently selling. We don't have open inventory that we can just do run of network in the social stuff. That's really for the integrated marketing
Mhm.
partnerships. So as we do more of those you have to have the white glove service from us. I don't want to make the short form stuff just transactional and partnership. It just winds up being you're selling another medium for
Right.
somebody else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I totally understand what you're saying. I think and you really did answer the question. So I get the idea of yeah, we've got one advertiser that's integrated. I think where I struggle is when we have multiples, right? So if we've got 5 or 6 advertisers running in a show, how does that translate over? And it sounds really you aren't translating all 5 or 6 advertisers over. You're saying, "Hey, this is a special partnership for this particular advertiser."
Correct. That's the way we're doing it now. We do talk about this, and there's probably a way forward where there will be inventory that can live in those clips and the shorts. So as we think about that, there isn't as much demand for that now. I think it's a concept, and there's a lot of this stuff that's on the whiteboard that may never make it out.
Mhm.
But we're thinking about that as demand grows. I think as we have more success and there's more and more of these integrated campaigns, it's going to become pretty scarce. How do all the advertisers that support that host take turns participating? And again, we can productize that too. That doesn't have to be a big integrated campaign. That can just be, hey, it's standard that we rotate you through. There's inventory we've
Mhm.
created. We rotate you through the socials and the other stuff based on the buy and what share of voice you have or you've negotiated with us. So
Mhm.
that's a pretty easy next step to make, I think.
Yeah. One of the things that we all, I think, in the podcast space struggle with is the operational side of dealing with execution. So when you're talking about a content creator, everybody is different and there oftentimes it isn't just cut and dry like this is what we have to offer and you get in a new show and it's all exactly the same. It's all very different and trying to deal with the individual content creator and execute at a high level, I believe is the real magic in this business is if you are able to execute well what you sold for with a totally independent content creator, then there's a huge win. For me, when we think about that consistency of messaging and just the coordination of the campaigns across all of these multi-channels, it is often kind of an operational nightmare to try and get it all to roll out well and to be executed well. And I know that as sellers ourselves, that's been a challenge for us. And so I guess I'm just curious because and the way I look at it is I'm like, gosh, if I have 5 podcasts and they all were great content creators and we could create amazing campaigns for these 5 shows, like no problem. We're executing at a super high level, right? But when you talk about hundreds of shows, thousands of shows, trying to figure out a system and this is where I think that scale piece comes into play. Okay, this is such a great idea. It creates terrific results for advertisers, but how do we execute it? Have you guys figured out a way to productize it?
I think, and I'm biased, I think we're best in class at it, but we have a long way to go. I think I talk to and one of the reasons I really like being here is we're distributed globally. Like the leadership team, we've got people in Sweden, UK, New York, Maine. So I talk to our head of product and engineering almost every day, if not twice a day. And we're just connected at the hip. So we have what we're building and what our engineers are focused on, but it's not just separate. It's not just trying to just make everything scalable and just it's really collaborative with the creator network, the
Mhm.
creator team, and the sales and business ops teams. So I think the key is let's not do again like what other industries did. And I was in mobile when it's okay, here are the standards for mobile banners. And it's just it had to become so it lost all of its creativity. You couldn't
Mhm.
do any cool stuff on the home screen anymore. It was just like for the sake of scale, we gave up everything that made it work really well. So we want to make sure we hold on to that and keeping the creators unique, like different length shows, what they talk about, how does advertising fit in some of these shows the same way? I listened to
Right.
one where only does a bunch at the beginning and then he's like, that's all you're going to hear. So that's like really respectful to his listener, tougher for the advertiser. So I think we've done a really good job with investment in engineering and product so that that's all they're focused on doing is how do we keep the magic of the originality, the uniqueness, and scale that. Some of the tools we have, like Ad Collab, they let the creator put in as much uniqueness and what's special about their show. And we collect a lot of data around them and what they are and understanding our creators really deeply so that we can apply that and match that to the demand of the
Mhm.
advertiser. So we have those kinds of tools where it's really designed to do engagement at scale, which is I think the hardest thing to do. Even great companies like I'm a fan. We watch Netflix every night, but when they rolled out their ad platform, they're like, okay, it's going to be ad breaks, and here's the first in podcast. It's the same model. They didn't try and hold on to any of the magic. Should we do something different? So
Mhm.
I like that podcasting is trying to hold on to that. What makes us special? So using technology and things like Ad Collab, as I'd mentioned, to not just make self-serve or programmatic an exchange of impressions for money. It's an exchange of impressions for that engagement and uniqueness, or I should say, exchange of money for the uniqueness that podcasting can bring. So,
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. When I think about podcast advertising, what really attracted me so heavily was listening to Alex Bloomberg and his startup podcast. And I just loved the way that they did ads. I mean, they were like 5, 6 minute ads, but they were
yeah.
amazing. And it took me a long time as a listener to be like, is this an ad? Which I don't know if we will get back to that place or if we have maintained that place at all. What I'm really curious about is can we do both, right? So I guess the way that I look at it is I say, okay, we've got this pie of impressions,
Yeah.
and we know we can deliver this many impressions at super high touch, super integration, but we don't always know, especially in audio, how many impressions we're going to have to sell, right? Like maybe all of a sudden this show had something that happened and they've got an extra 100,000 impressions this month that we weren't expecting, or maybe it's 500,000 impressions, right? So, is there a place for us to say, hey, programmatic needs to be there? As I look at programmatic as the cement, kind of like maybe the mortar, maybe that's the correct term, that is tying these bigger initiatives together. And the
Mhm.
other thing that I am so hoping happens, and I don't think that we've seen this yet, but I would like the price difference to be greater between programmatic and something that's more integrated. So if we're coming to a brand and we're saying, okay, you're going to have all these YouTube integrations, all these social integrations. We're going to be putting you in our newsletter. We're going to have your merchandise available at our live events, and we're going to talk about you in the podcast with ads, right?
Mhm.
Like we're doing this super integrated campaign that is going to come at a different price than, oh, you just want some like spots and dots, right? Like, where is that price differential? And right now, I think about some of the, let's face it, like the superstars in podcasts that are running ads, probably pretty low CPMs in comparison. That if that brand came to them and said, hey, Conan, like, I want to do a brand deal with you, he would say,
Yeah,
okay, well, give me like several $1,000,000 and I will.
yeah.
Or you can buy a podcast ad and it's a $35 CPM, right? It feels like there needs to be a bigger price discrepancy between those two. And I see a place for all of it. And I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was in the UK last week and I went to an event. Coincidentally, there was an event going on because the future of audio and entertainment. And it was interesting to hear all the same problems on stage, all the same issues that we have, just with a different accent and some different shows and some different, like Acast was mentioned, is like trying to solve some of these problems. Yeah, I think that's the hard question. The way we, in a perfect world, the way we want to go to market is we want to do both. I think
Mhm.
if you pick your favorite your top 25 advertiser in the US, and we would love to say, hey, instead of just buying, there's way too much money that goes to the top 100 shows, top 200 shows. It's just, I know why. We all know why, because it's, you don't have time. You can't do bespoke things with 10,000 shows. But if you could, if there's a way that we could do both, where I would love it if these blue chip advertisers gave us a brand brief with a problem to solve. We do, maybe it's an integrated program on a dozen shows or 20 shows where it's a deep high touch, and then elements of that can run programmatically or can run across the long
Mhm.
tail. Even with those hosts, we've been working on a lot of cross, take a big host that maybe is has been a sponsor for a long time and run that voice in lookalike audiences, and then shows that work, then you go to that host, and that's an opportunity for a smaller show to participate in a bigger buy. So if we can do that kind of big, robust front end with a long tail that gives the advertisers scale that they want nationally. That's what the blue chips want. Nobody wants to do 10 shows that doesn't really reach anybody. And I think that's, to me, that's the way we've been going to market, and it's been received really well. Kind of trying to do both. I do worry about just we don't want casting to turn into other mediums where it's just cluttered and it's just kind of a white noise. The ads work because we're respectful of the listener. You realize that you don't need the very loud mariachi band and the screaming mattress deal and the car. You don't have to scream at the listener because it's not broadcast. It's not one to many. It's they've sought you out. They're listening to the content. You're much better off doing a long 3-minute funny ad that's part of the. There are many, many podcasters that I don't skip the ads because they're just as entertaining, you know? So I think that's the key.
I agree. And I also think that it is difficult for content creators to create really good ads. Not everyone is good at that. And sometimes shows are better off having a script or having an
Yes.
announcer read ad, right? Like it does take a special person to create a really interesting, funny ad read. And I do I do sometimes laugh that as an industry, we take the least qualified person in this whole circle and we say, okay, you create the ad. I know you know nothing about marketing, nothing
Yes.
about advertising, but can you just spit out something really amazing?
Make it compelling. And so I think the agencies that are focused on doing this right are going to win because
Yeah.
it's not a huge Super Bowl campaign where you're going to win awards, and it's like there's a lot more work to get this right, but it can work. It can really work for the clients if you nail it. So
Right.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. So I was curious before we wrap it up. I know you've alluded to your self-serve platform. How is that going for you? And are you able to purchase more integrated campaigns through the self-serve platform?
Yeah, so I would say on a weekly basis, we make product updates. We do a really good job communicating with the clients, the advertisers, and the creators at scale. And what are they looking for? What would make their lives easier? What would make them participate in more? How do we communicate brand briefs and RFPs that are pretty specific and unique at scale to them?
Mhm.
So those are the kinds, like we add features on a, I would say monthly, if not more aggressively. We add features that have it's requested more than once. We put it in the roadmap and we try and work really quickly, like a real tech company. But it's important. And if something's not working, we fix it or sunset it. So I've been really impressed with the team here and how quickly we can build and innovate and all that stuff.
Amazing, amazing. So I always like to ask people what their predictions are for the upcoming months and years. Anything that you see on the horizon that you're excited about?
Everything. I'm not joking. I think a lot of people talk about podcasting as okay, we've now reached the mountaintop and now it's a mature industry. And I think these first 10 years, and I know it's 20, but the really first 10 was like primordial soup, and then next 10 was getting to base camp, right? I'm not a mountain climber, but getting to base camp. And it's like, okay, now we need to get organized for this next stretch. So
Mhm.
I'm super excited because it's all facets. And I've worked in mature mediums where it's like, okay, you better innovate and compete to grow because the medium's not growing or the medium's growing low single digits. So you need to like do a lot. When I left radio, it was like 95% reach. There's not new audience coming, right?
Mhm.
Podcasting, the majority of adults don't have a regular podcast yet. It's coming. It's fun to watch people discover this. So we have new audience, new listeners coming to the medium, which is a tailwind. We have blue chip advertisers. I can't remember the number, but one of my slides for the IB thing is about the number of blue chip advertisers that have in the US that have advertised in podcasting. So we have new people coming, we have new advertisers coming, big ones with big deep
Mhm.
pockets that are curious. And then we have new technology. So we have to make sure we're ready for this influx. And
Mhm.
so that's what I'm most excited about is the new brands discovering this, our opportunity to help them do it right, and then prove that this is not an ancillary medium that should be tucked under audio. I think it's a lot closer to all the money in influencer and social. I think what's an influencer? An influencer is a
Mhm.
personality that like convinces
Yes.
people like when
Yes.
I think we have credibility we don't. I think our creators have credibility because
Mhm.
someone sought them out because they're either funny, interesting, informative, or an expert in their field. So you have this built-in credibility that's sought out. I think we should be charging more now that I'm saying it out loud.
I
So
agree.
yes.
Raise those CPMs.
Yes, exactly. We'll put it on it.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. Love your enthusiasm and the vision that you have. So, yeah, just excited to see that. If people want to connect with you, where is a good place for them to find you?
The easiest thing is I've got a external email, just GG at Acast. So that's my keep it easy to remember. So that's please would love to talk about this stuff. Again, I'm a newbie to the industry, but I love it. And I'm trying to keep my fresh set of eyes. So it's not, I want to think about it. So I'm trying to
Great.
stay that beginner's mindset. But we have so many people that have been here 8, 9, 10 years. We've got our anniversary coming up like tomorrow. I think like we literally are 10 years old, I think.
Tomorrow, you guys are 10 years old?
Yeah, so
How
there's some
exciting.
parties and some stuff on Thursday. So I think Thursday's the actual day that
Nice, nice. And
mm,
and obviously we're gonna be posting this in a few weeks. So when we're talking about the actual day, that would be April 24th of
April.
2020, which
Happy
is
birthday, Acast.
yay.
Yeah,
That's
happy
exciting.
anniversary.
Very, very
Yeah.
cool. Great anniversary date too. Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that you have enjoyed it as much as I have. Really, some fascinating things happening in the podcast space. And for those of you who feel like we have reached the pinnacle, we have not. There is more to come, as Greg said. If you would like to check out this podcast on YouTube, make sure you head on over and check out my channel there. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again next time. Thank you for listening to the Podcast to Advertising Playbook, your source to a better understanding of the podcast to advertising industry.